We have so many immigrant families in this country. We have so many families where English is not their first language. We are a multilingual and multicultural society. And to create this sense and feeling of belonging really requires meeting people where they are. And so I love the fact that there is this connection between my work at ACTFL and my work now at PTA, because it's allowing us to look through this lens of how do we create a space where everyone feels like they belong.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Howie Berman, Executive Director of the National Parent-Teacher Association, or National PTA. Howie, welcome to the show.
Joanna, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Howie, how long have we known each other? It's been a minute, right?
Yeah, over 20 years probably.
Oh, God, can't believe that.
I know.
Well, you've had quite a lot of success that I can't wait to dive into. But first, tell us about National PTA.
So National PTA is the oldest child advocacy organization in the United States. We have a rather simple but very important mission, and that is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. PTA is a nationwide network of really millions of families, students, community leaders, teachers, administrators, who are really just dedicated to making a difference for children, whether it's their education, health and safety, well-being. So we really cover a lot of issues related to student success, child well-being, and really the community at large.
Howie, who are the members? Are they individuals, or are they the local PTAs, or both maybe?
So the members are individuals.
Okay.
But we have a rather complicated structure. I think a lot of people know PTA from their local PTA units that they may have joined, especially, as a parent. We have about 20,000 local PTA units across the country, which is amazing. Over 2 million, around 2.5 million members nationally. It's across the gamut of whether it's parents, teachers, administrators, and community leaders. I think one of the things that people assume or they expect is that you have to be a parent to be a member of a local PTA unit. And that's just not the case. It's one of those things that we try to dispel because we really want to make sure people understand that this is a shared experience and a shared responsibility for us to support school communities, whether you have a child in the school currently or not. And maybe you had a child 10 years ago, they've gone on to do great things, but you still care enough about your community locally that you want to join PTA. So we try to make sure that people understand that this is all about shared community responsibility.
Howie, during the prep, you said we're a professional organization, but you're also a community organization. Is that why? Because it's really about improving child welfare, which improves communities?
It is. It's I don't want to say necessarily a domino effect, but it is a circular relationship. Our members are different from other, what I would call professional membership associations, in that they don't have that profession that ties them, that common profession. So they're not all doctors, they're not all lawyers, they're not all engineers. They have very different lived experiences and contexts. Some of them are stay-at-home caregivers and parents. Some of them have very professional roles in the workforce, but all across the workforce. And so what we really try to do is give these folks who join the resources they need to be great advocates for the issues that we care about. And you do that by giving them the training. Many of them are serving at the local PTA level, either as a president or a treasurer or a secretary. They're serving at the state level in similar roles. They're advocating for issues that are important to children and families and communities. And so we just want to make sure that they have those resources. But I also think we want to make sure that we are elevating this idea of volunteerism. Just because you don't get paid to be a volunteer, it's still incredibly important. Organizations like PTA could not exist without the incredible support of our volunteers. And so we want to make sure that they have the best training, access to the best resources so that they can do this work that they do, because they put an awful amount of time and energy and love into this work.
I got a zillion questions about National PTA, but before we do that, I want to dive into your journey. Like you said, we've known each other a long time. We met when you were at ASCPT, but you've had quite the career since then. So how do you get to become executive director of National PTA?
Well, the short answer is I don't know, to be perfectly honest, because it really has been a journey. I mean, we talk about leadership journeys a lot. Oftentimes, we think a leadership journey is going to take one path and it takes a completely different path. I wasn't even planning on being in the association world. I'd gotten a master's degree in Middle Eastern studies. I was a Spanish and political science major in college. I thought I was going to do diplomacy work. I thought I was going to do international development work. My first job was, as you mentioned, at ASCPT, and it started as a temp job because, frankly, I was looking for roles in what I'd gone to school for, but because of 9/11, everything got backed up. I had to take a job. I took a job as a temp with ASCPT, and I've never looked back. I worked in medical and scientific organizations in a variety of roles, whether it was professional development, meetings, IT, if you can believe that, membership. And then I transitioned to this great opportunity at ACTFL, the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, which was a great mix of my association background up to that point and my love of languages. I'd never been a teacher, but I was a language geek. I'd studied 5 or 6 different languages in my lifetime and just was very interested in language. And I moved up in that organization. And when the time came for an opening as executive director, I threw my hat in the ring. And to be honest, Joanna, I didn't expect to get that position. I did it because I wanted to sort of challenge myself. And then lo and behold, the board said, no, you're the guy. And I was like, oh, I guess I have to do this now, huh? So that was an interesting transition, very different from PTA right now as I'm completing my 90 days, because I was internal. So I knew the organization, but I think people expect when you're an internal candidate and you become the next executive director that since you know the organization, it's going to be easy. And it's hard, but in different ways. And so I've taken from that experience to now being at National PTA, like I said, ACTFL for 13 years, took some time off, definitely between the pandemic and sort of the aftermath, took a much needed break. And then realized that education was where my love was. I'm a parent. I have a 15 and 13-year-old. These are issues that are very important to me. We've been a PTA family locally here in Maryland. I grew up with my mom being a PTA leader locally when I grew up in Connecticut. So I knew of PTA, but I knew it at the local level. And so this is a whole new experience for me now, really getting immersed in that ecosystem of PTA at all these different levels. So really great match for me. Super excited. Like I said, I'm in the beginning stages, but I'm already seeing the world of possibilities with this organization.
You've been there 90 days. What have you learned?
What haven't I learned? So the first thing I'll say is PTA has been around for 128 years. It is a very legacy-driven, legacy-rich, impactful organization that has been in so many important places during our history as a country. I mean, PTA was behind food safety standards. It was behind the FDA starting. It's been behind the push for disability rights. It's been behind the push for school lunches. Like, school lunches didn't exist before the PTA got involved in those issues. So it has this really rich history. it also is a fairly traditional organization, I think partly because of that history and that legacy. It's also an organization that is deeply, deeply committed to student success and community building. And that was what was really exciting to me, because I have seen myself locally with my own kids' schools, the power of PTA when teachers, when parents and caregivers, students, administrators, business leaders, when they come together, it really does benefit the school community. The other thing I've learned is that we have a lot of challenges in terms of, our politics of today aside. I mean, PTA is a nonpartisan organization, and we've been for our entire history, and we've worked with administrations and Congresses across the aisles of politics. But what I would say is the challenges continue regardless of the time that we're in and who's in the White House, who's in Congress. And so we really try to hit home this issue of let's focus on what our kids need most. And they need safe schools. They need healthy schools. They need healthy meals. They need to make sure that there's family engagement in the community. And so we really try to hit those issues hard so people understand that, again, it's not just about a few parents having a meeting in a gymnasium somewhere or a cafeteria. It's really about building those relationships.
Howie, coming to National PTA is different because you're obviously new to the organization. What have you learned about yourself in the first 90 days?
Wow. I've learned how important listening is and how important creating space for people is. I put together a transition plan for myself before I started at PTA, something that was very different from my other experiences as an executive director, again, because I was coming into a new organization. And it was broken into these three areas. And the first area or phase was listen and learn. It was don't come in with these big ideas that you're going to impose, that you're going to say this is what you need to do before you actually listen to people. So I set up one-on-one meetings with every board member. I set up one-on-one meetings with every past president, living past president. I set up meetings with our partners, with other folks who we work closely with, other associations in the education space, in the family engagement space. And I went on this tour of state conventions, right? So I hit the ground running, and it was really about getting out there, building relationships. I spoke to hundreds of PTA, local and state PTA leaders, because I really wanted to get a sense of what were their challenges, what were their pain points, but also where were the opportunities. I learned that you need to be humble. I mean, this is something I've learned over time. When I started my association career, I was a know-it-all. I was a self-admitted know-it-all. And I think coming into an organization where you don't know the culture, you have to be humble. And so I really forced myself to observe, to ask questions, but not to judge, and to simply say, we're going to learn together. We're going to ask hard questions, both staff and board. And then we're going to really take a methodical approach to how we address some of these issues. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Howie, I want to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago. You said that you took some time off between ACTFL and National PTA. Tell us about that, because I think you took, I don't know how much time off.
Close to a year.
But why was that important?
Well, it was important, I think, professionally and personally, frankly. We speak to a lot of folks in this space, in the association space, and we compare notes, and we share journeys, and we share challenges and frustrations, and also our successes. A lot of people in the association space have been struggling, continue to struggle, whether it's mental health, whether it's work-life balance, whether it's imposter syndrome and feeling like maybe you're not as good as you thought you were or that you need to be. And coming out of the pandemic, I had been with ACTFL for 12, 13 years. I was super proud of the things that we had accomplished. And I felt like I needed a break, not just for myself, but for my family. And I also needed a reset because I wanted to do this for years and years and years. This is my passion. The association space is what I love, but in particular, issues of education and family engagement, student success. And I felt like in order for me to be my best in the next stage of my career, I needed to take a break. It really was a great decision. It was hard because I'm a doer. And so it was hard. And, I can be sometimes impatient because I want to get things done. It forced me to slow down, to really observe and to recalibrate what was important. And what was important was being my best and being able to be a good parent. That year, I got to spend time chaperoning school trips, something I never got to do because, my time at ACTFL, I had one child that was 6 months old when I started at ACTFL. So I really missed a lot. And it's not that you necessarily have regrets, but you want to make sure that you're focusing on the things that matter. And so it gave me an opportunity to focus on the things that matter, but then be better, be stronger, be excited and energized so that I could come into whatever that next position was better for that organization and better for myself and for my family.
Howie, I am hearing a passionate, charged up leader, and I bet your time off really contributed to that, allowed you to be that.
It did, without a doubt. And again, because of my personal connection to PTA, because of my association background, because of my love of education issues, it really was the perfect match. And I will tell you too, when I was going through the interviewing process, I knew from the first interview, the first meeting that I had with the search committee, that this was the right place for me to be. And it worked out that way.
Well, let's turn to National PTA. How's membership?
Membership, we have about 2.5 million members. I will say, though, that membership, like for a lot of organizations, has been on the decline. And I think there's a lot of factors with that. One of them, I think, is people are torn in so many different directions nowadays. For an organization like PTA, we are so reliant on volunteer leaders and people who are really committed to this mission. And we do have a bit of a challenge because, again, we're not tied by a profession. So there's not that tie that you have, I think, with other organizations. I will say that we need to, as an organization, and we've already started doing this, looking at what is the value proposition of membership in National PTA. We're known as an advocacy organization. We're the voice for folks who care about these issues, and sometimes we're the voice for people who are voiceless. And we want to make sure that we are trumpeting that advocacy work as one of those great benefits. But I also think we have an opportunity to grow membership in so many different ways, whether it's through training and professional development for, again, we say professional development, but we're talking about volunteer development and leadership development, through reimagining events that we host, through our incredible grants program that we have that allows local PTA and state PTAs to put on incredible programs. And one thing I'll say about that is we've really, and will continue to be, very intentional about centering student voices. I think that's one of the keys to membership growth. Because this is about the students, right? This is about our kids and making sure that they have the best opportunities to thrive. And so we want to make sure that we are providing those opportunities for the students to have a voice. So part of the structure too, you may know this, there are PTAs, there are also PTSAs, so parent-teacher-student associations. Oftentimes they're used interchangeably. Doesn't mean that a PTA can't have student members, and it doesn't mean that a PTSA is really any different. It's about the intentionality of including the students in that title. But we really want to make sure, I think, that we're centering student voices. We also want to make sure that we are creating new opportunities for people to engage. Going back to this issue of this being a traditional organization, I think the leadership pathways have been rather traditional. And leadership and membership, I think, are very connected. And so when you have traditional pathways where it can appear as though it's a closed system, where you have certain people who are afforded the opportunities or are involved, and if there's a perception that it's really hard for me to crack that nut, so to speak, to get involved, I do think it has an impact on the overall membership or membership strategy of the organization. So how can we bring new people in? Not everybody wants to be on a committee. Not everybody wants to be the president or a board member for National PTA. What are other ways that we can engage so people feel connected to the mission, but they may be those folks who can't make the huge commitment to the organization from a volunteer standpoint?
Well, You manage a federation of units, right? From the small units based at a school to maybe a state unit. I guess a couple questions here. First of all, if I'm a member of my school's local PTA, how do I even know that there's a national PTA? So that then I can say, wow, there's a national organization that maybe has higher impact, maybe has slightly different focus because of your advocacy work. So how do I even know about you?
It's a great question. And I'll be honest, my own wife, who is a PTA president for our son's middle school, until I had started this process of the search for this position, she really didn't know much about National PTA. And I think that's a common occurrence that we're seeing. Because of the way the system works, people typically join at the local level,
right?
And then things flow up. A lot of federated organizations, you join at the national level and things flow down. So the structure of the organization in itself causes some challenges. I will say that is one of these things that obviously we're looking at. How can we change the governance, change the structure to allow that?
So if I'm a member of my local PTA, I am not automatically a member of the national. I have to make a separate decision to join the national.
No, you are. You are a member, but it's not put out in front of you necessarily what those resources are.
Oh.
That's the challenge. And in fact, Joanna, the thing that's really unique about it is we don't even necessarily know the names and identities of all of our members. Have you ever heard of an organization that's like that?
I have, actually. The Boy Scouts are like that.
So it's similar. It's a similar situation like that. So we have to be extra intentional and work really hard. This is why building relationships is so important. This is why I spent a whole lot of days and nights on the road my first 90 days, going to state conventions, meeting local leaders. I sat behind tables at some of these conventions to give people information about the organization. And you'd be surprised how many people would come up to our booth or come up to me in a meeting, and they didn't even know that National existed. So there's a lot of education that we have to do intentionally, but also I think the structure has to be looked at. And this is something we've talked about. This is not a surprise. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. I think the structure has to be looked at so that we can make sure that the information is more free-flowing, because National PTA has this incredible resources that people just don't know about, whether it's our grants programs, whether it's training, family engagement. In fact, I know I'm burying the lead here, but our online learning platform is called Thrive. So there you go. I hope that's not copyright infringement in any way.
Yeah. No, I have a trademark for Associations Thrive in the podcasting world.
Then we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're totally good. Well, so you've got this goal to professionalize volunteerism. Man, do I love this. How do you do this? Is that through your LMS?
Well, this is a work in progress. So through the LMS right now, we have a lot of really great courses that people can access. So if you're a member of PTA, you can go on there. There's different tracks. So if, say, you're a treasurer at a local PTA, there's a financial track, and you can learn all about that. If you are an advocacy chair, which many local PTAs have an advocacy chair, or even at the state level, there's an advocacy track to sort of teach you how to be an advocate. What I would like to see, and we've talked about this internally, and you've sort of teased this out, this idea of professionalizing volunteerism. Because we don't have that, again, that common profession that ties PTA members, I think people think, well, it's not really a professional organization. But the volunteerism, in effect, is the professional aspect of the organization. You have to standardize, you have to upskill, you have to continuously learn, because the environment is shifting, the regulations are shifting, the rules are shifting, and so we have to be on top of that. So a great way for us to professionalize volunteerism would be something like a certification process where people could actually get certified as a certified PTA volunteer. And it could have a specialization, whether it's financial or governance or advocacy. And then what a great way to demonstrate that you have gone through that really rigorous process of learning. And we know learning is an ongoing process, right? So you get your certification, you can show it off, you give your local PTA sort of that gravitas and that show of expertise, legitimacy, value. And then you regularly would have to potentially renew that certification. So I think it would be a great way culturally to shift in PTA how we perceive volunteerism. My grandmother years ago used to always ask, she was worried that I was in the nonprofit world because she'd always say, "Do they pay you?" And I'd be like, "Yes, Grandma, they pay me."
Right.
I said, but you have to understand, I'm staff. Our volunteers are not being paid, but they're still giving up an incredible amount of their time and energy. And we should honor them for that.
Right, right.
We should give them this public demonstration of our appreciation and love for what they do, because that's how we send the message to the next generation of volunteers that they're valued and that we need them.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying all this because I am a scout leader and I have been a scout leader for maybe 15 years. They're now called Scouting America. What they say is that every scout deserves a trained leader. And Howie, you're going to laugh. There's actually something that they call a PhD in scouting. You have to take 15 courses and teach a course.
I love it.
And so I have a PhD in scouting, in Cub Scouting, actually.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And, it's demonstrated training, I guess, and not so much expertise, but knowledge of a certain thing. And I have a patch that I get to wear in my uniform that says trained.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's what we should be doing. I think sometimes we take for granted volunteers, not just in terms of the time and work that they do, but we take for granted that they know going into the role what they are doing.
Well, and there's two aspects to it, right? There's do you know the role and do you know how to be a volunteer in the role? Because those are two separate things.
Sure.
And you and I know that when people know how to do the job, but also know how to run the unit, everybody's much happier and people stick around because the unit is well managed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And those volunteer to staff relationships, that's an area where we really need to make sure that people understand, like, what is my role? What is the staff's role? How can we work together for a common good? How can we make this not about you're in my territory or I'm in your territory? How do we actually work in a cohesive way? Because ultimately, this is about the mission.
Yeah.
So if we're not creating space where we can work toward the mission, then we need to create different space.
Yeah. Howie, what's a myth about PTAs that you wish you could completely demolish?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think people think that you have to be a parent, obviously, to be in a PTA. That's the biggest one. I would also say that people think that PTAs are for rich or maybe more affluent folks. We actually see that the majority of our PTAs are in Title I districts. So it's actually the opposite.
And what's a Title I district?
So a Title I district is a district that, and it's defined by the Title I of the Department of Ed, that they require additional resources because of the levels of wealth in that district, like the per capita salaries of families. And so for folks in Title I schools, they require a lot of wraparound resources. They might be resources related to free and reduced lunch, for instance, or additional support services for students after school. What we see is that the majority of our PTAs are actually in these districts that require a lot of additional support. And it's not just the students who require that support, it's the families who require that support. And one thing I'll say that is sort of a tie-in to my work at ACTFL, I was in the world language space for more than a dozen years. And one of the things I've seen at PTA, which is a huge opportunity for us, we have so many immigrant families in this country. We have so many families where English is not their first language. We are a multilingual and multicultural society. And to create this sense and feeling of belonging really requires meeting people where they are. And so I love the fact that there is this connection between my work at ACTFL and my work now at PTA, because it's allowing us to look through this lens of how do we create a space where everyone feels like they belong. And one of them is looking at our multilingual services, our translation services. If someone sees resources only in English, if they see PD only in English, they're going to immediately say, look, that's not a place for me. They're not thinking about me. And so that's been one of the challenges immediately. And I spoke about it during my interview process. I've spoken to the staff about it. It's a huge opportunity for PTA because there are millions of people out there who feel like the school environment is not one that's necessarily inviting for them. They have to work harder. They have to work much more diligently to be a part of that community. And so what a great legacy for us to be able to create the space and create the resources so that those people who have traditionally not felt like they were part of the school community can now not only feel like they're part of the school community, but they can contribute to that school community in a meaningful way. I just love that idea. So going back to this idea of the myths, we're really trying to create something here that people are proud of, that they feel like is serving everyone's needs, and also is not just for parents of current students, and it's not just for folks who may be in more well-off school communities that have incredible resources.
Well, Howie, that is a beautiful vision. You've been there 90 days. You'll have to come back next year. And tell us about your first year.
I would love that. Thank you.
It's a date.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. You know, my personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends.